The universe had a way of hiding its secrets in the coldest places. Tarek had learned this truth over 5 years of searching dead worlds for the living. His ship, the Wandering Mercy, was small enough to slip through blockades and quiet enough to avoid detection. It carried medical supplies, survival rations, and one stubborn human who refused to believe that anyone was beyond saving. Today, that stubbornness had brought him to Vex 7, an ice planet so remote that even scavengers avoided it. The world was a wasteland of frozen methane seas and crystalline storms that could shred metal. Nothing survived here. Nothing should have been here at all. Yet his scanner had caught something. A biosignature faint as a dying candle, but unmistakably alive. Tarek guided his ship through the storm, his weathered hands steady on the controls. At 34, he looked older lines carved deep around his eyes from years of squinting at medical readouts, gray threading through his dark hair from too many sleepless nights. His face was kind but haunted, the face of a man who had seen too much death and saved too few lives. The scanner pulsed, stronger now. Something was definitely down there. Dottie set the ship down on a flat expanse of blue ice, the landing struts groaning against the bitter cold. The external temperature read -170 degrees. Tarek sealed his thermal suit, checked his medical pack twice, and stepped into the airlock. The cold hit him like a physical blow, even through the insulation. His breath fogged instantly, freezing into tiny crystals that danced in the wind. He activated his handheld scanner and followed the signal, each step crunching through the frost. The storm intensified, howling like something alive and angry. Tarek pushed forward, his legs burning with effort as the wind tried to drive him back. Then he saw it a shape in the snow, too geometric to be natural. Armor. Royal armor. His heart stopped. He knew those markings. Everyone in human space knew them. The angular script, the crimson and gold inlay, the symbol of the crescent sun. These belonged to the Vinthari Empire, the most feared alien civilization in the known galaxy. Tarek, single quotes as hands, trembled as he brushed away the snow. Beneath the frost was a face. A woman's face, though calling it merely that felt inadequate. Her skin was a deep bronze that seemed to hold an inner luminescence even in death's grip. High cheekbones framed eyes that were closed now, their lids dusted with ice crystals. Her lips, full and dark as wine, were parted slightly as if caught mid-whisper. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Beautiful and terrifying. This was a Vinthari. More than that, the armor's elaborate design marked her as nobility. Perhaps even royalty. Tarek should have left her. The Vinthari had burned human colonies, enslaved populations, and showed no mercy in their expansion across the stars. His own family had died in a Vinthari raid 8 years ago. His wife, his daughter, his parents all ash because of her kind. He should have walked away. Should have let the ice take her, but then her chest moved, just barely. A shallow breath that misted in the frozen air. Damn it, Tarek whispered. His training took over. He couldn't leave anyone to die, not even his enemies. Maybe especially not his enemies, because that would make him just like them. He slid his arms beneath her shoulders and knees, grunting with the effort. She was tall, easily 6.5 feet, and heavily muscled beneath the armor. Each step back to the ship felt like moving a mountain. The wind screamed louder, as if the planet itself was trying to stop him. Tarek's muscles burned, his lungs ached, but he refused to stop. Finally, the Wandering Mercy appeared through the storm, its lights warm and welcoming. He stumbled up the ramp, nearly collapsing as the airlock sealed behind them. Heat flooded the cabin. Tarek lowered the Vinthari woman onto his medical bed, his hands already moving through the diagnostic routines. The scanner told him everything he feared: internal bleeding, 3 broken ribs, severe hypothermia, and something else traces of a toxin in her bloodstream. Not enough to kill, but enough to weaken. She'd been poisoned, then abandoned. Who does this to their own? Tarek muttered, starting an IV line. Her blood was darker than human blood, with an almost golden sheen to it. He'd studied Vinthari physiology in medical school. Know your enemy and all that, but he'd never expected to use that knowledge to save one dot as he worked. Cutting away damaged armor and treating her wounds, he studied her face. Even unconscious, even broken, there was something regal about her. An intensity in the set of her jaw, a strength in the lines of her face. This was someone accustomed to command, to power. What had happened to bring her so low? Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the small ship, Tarek fought his own battle against death. He sealed wounds, stabilized her vitals, and wrapped her in thermal blankets. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, her condition improved. Her breathing deepened. Her color returned. That strange bronze-gold glow brightening. Tarek finally allowed himself to collapse into his chair, exhausted. He stared at his patient, at this impossible woman who should have been his enemy, but was now simply someone who needed his help. "What's your name?" he asked the unconscious woman. "Who are you?" She didn't answer, of course, but her presence filled the small cabin like a storm of her own. Tarek realized his hands were shaking, not from cold or exhaustion, but from the magnitude of what he'd done. If anyone found out he'd saved a Vinthari noble, he'd be branded a traitor. Humanity would never forgive him. The ship's sensors suddenly chimed. Tarek's blood went cold. 3 vessels had just entered orbit. The scanner identified them immediately. Vinthari warships. They were searching for her. Tarek moved quickly, activating the ship's stealth systems. The lights dimmed. The engines went silent. The wandering Mercy became just another piece of ice on a frozen world. He held his breath as the warship scanning. Beams swept across the surface, passing over his position once, twice, 3 times. Then they moved on, heading toward the northern pole. Tarek exhaled shakily. They'd bought some time, but not much. The Vinthari would be thorough. They'd search every inch of this planet eventually. He looked back at the woman on his medical bed. She stirred slightly, her head turning. For just a moment, her eyes opened brilliant golden eyes that seemed to hold the light of stars. They focused on him with surprising clarity, studying him with an intensity that made him feel pinned in place. Then she spoke. Her voice was deep, melodious, and utterly alien. The words meant nothing to him, but the tone was unmistakable. A question, perhaps even a demand. "I'm Tarek," he said softly, pointing to himself. "I'm trying to help you." Her golden eyes narrowed, confusion and suspicion warring in their depths. She tried to rise, but pain lanced through her, and she fell back with a sharp gasp. Her hand moved to her ribs, and Tarek saw understanding dawn in her expression. She was injured, badly, and she was in a human vessel. The woman's lips moved again, forming words he couldn't understand. But the look she gave him was clear enough. Why? Why had he saved her? Why was he helping her? Why hadn't he left her to die? Tarek wished he had a good answer. Instead, he just shook his head and said, "Because I couldn't leave you there. I don't know why. I just couldn't." The woman stared at him for a long moment, those golden eyes searching his face as if trying to read his soul. Then, slowly, her hand moved. She pressed it against her chest, over her heart, and spoke a single word. Kasara. Her name. She'd given him her name. Tarek felt something shift in his chest, some invisible wall beginning to crack. "Kasara," he repeated, trying to match her pronunciation. She nodded slightly. Then her eyes closed again, exhaustion claiming her. But before sleep took her, Tarek saw something flicker across her face. Not hatred or suspicion, but something softer. Something that looked almost like gratitude. Outside, the storm continued to rage. The Vinthari warships continued their search. And inside a small medical vessel, hidden in the snow, two enemies had just taken the first step toward becoming something else entirely. Tarek settled back into his chair, watching his patient breathe, watching Kasara breathe. He had no idea what came next. No idea how this impossible situation would resolve itself. But for now, in this moment, he'd done what he always did. He'd saved a life. And maybe, just maybe, that life would change everything. The third day aboard the Wandering Mercy began like the others, with silence and careful distance. Tarek checked Kasara's vitals, while she watched him with those unnerving golden eyes, tracking every movement he made. Her wounds were healing faster than he'd expected, her alien physiology knitting itself back together with remarkable efficiency. But the tension between them remained thick as the ice outside. She still couldn't stand without assistance. He still couldn't understand her language. And they were still trapped on a frozen world with her people hunting overhead. Tarek had tried everything to communicate beyond names and gestures. He'd pulled up star maps, pointing to different systems. He'd drawn pictures. He'd even attempted to use his ship's translation matrix, but it only had basic Vinthari military phrases, mostly threats and demands. Nothing useful for actual conversation. This morning, he found her sitting up in bed, staring at her hands. The golden glow beneath her bronze skin had returned fully, making her look almost ethereal in the dim cabin lighting. She'd removed the remaining pieces of her armor during the night, leaving her in the dark underlayer that clung to her powerful frame. Tarek tried not to stare, but it was difficult. She was striking in a way that made his pulse quicken uncomfortably. Kasara looked up as he approached with breakfast reconstituted protein and nutrient paste. Not appetizing, but it would keep them both alive. She accepted the container with a slight nod, their fingers brushing for just a moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Tarek's arm. Her skin was warm, almost hot to the touch. She noticed his reaction and pulled her hand back quickly, something like embarrassment crossing her regal features. They ate in silence. Tarek kept glancing at the sensors, watching for patrol ships. The Vinthari had been growing more systematic in their search pattern. It was only a matter of time before they found the Wandering Mercy dot after breakfast. Kasara stood on her own for the first time. She swayed slightly, gripping the wall for support, but she remained upright. Pride blazed in her eyes as she took one step, then another. Tarek moved to help her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. She needed to do this herself. He understood that need. The need to prove you weren't broken, even when every part of you hurt. Kasara made it to the ship's small viewport before her strength gave out. Tarek caught her before she fell, his arm around her waist. She was tall enough that her head came to his shoulder, and for a moment they stood frozen, neither pulling away. Outside the viewport, the endless ice stretched to the horizon, beautiful and deadly. Kasara stared at it with an expression Tarek couldn't read. Then she spoke, her voice soft and filled with something that sounded like grief. She pointed to the sky, then to herself, then made a pushing gesture. Cast out. Abandoned. They left you here, Tarek said quietly. Your own people. She turned to look at him, understanding his tone even if not his words. Her golden eyes searched his face, and he saw the question in them again. The same question she'd been asking since she woke. Why did you save me? Tarek helped her back to the bed and did something he hadn't planned. He pulled up his ship's logs, scrolling back 8 years. He found the file he was looking for and displayed the image on the screen. A family photo. Tarek, younger and smiling, his arm around a beautiful woman with kind eyes. A little girl, maybe 7, sat on his shoulders, laughing. Behind them, two older people, his parents, smiled at the camera. "My family," Tarek said, pointing to each person. "Wife, daughter, mother, father." Kisara leaned forward, studying the image intently. She looked at the younger version of Tarek, so different from the weathered man before her now. Her expression soft dot, and Tarek pulled up the next file. A news report. Video footage of a burning colony. Bodies in the streets. Ships overhead, Vinthari ships, marked with the same symbols that had been on Kisara's armor. "Your people did this," Tarek said, his voice cracking despite his efforts to stay calm. 8 years ago, Caldera Colony. They killed everyone. My wife, my daughter, my parents. Everyone I loved." He pointed to himself, then to the burning image, then made a breaking gesture over his heart. Kisara stared at the screen, her face going pale beneath the bronze. She looked at the Vinthari ships, at the destruction, then back at Tarek. Horror filled her golden eyes. She understood. She understood that she was looking at atrocities committed by her own people, that this man who had saved her life had every reason to hate her. She reached out slowly, her large hand covering his. Her touch was gentle despite her strength. She spoke in her language, words tumbling out in a rush. Tarek couldn't understand them, but he heard the anguish in her voice. The shame, the regret. Tears tracked down her bronze cheeks, glowing faintly gold in the dim light. "You didn't do this," Tarek said softly. "I know that. But your people did. And I still saved you. Do you understand? I still couldn't let you die." Kisara squeezed his hand, her grip almost painfully tight. She pulled him closer, pressing his hand against her chest, over her heart. It beat strong and steady beneath his palm. Then she moved his hand to his own chest, mirroring the gesture. The same. They were the same. Human and Vinthari, enemy and enemy, but beneath it all the same. Hearts beating, blood flowing, lives that mattered. Tarek felt something break inside him. Some wall he'd been maintaining since he found her in the snow. He'd told himself he was just doing his duty as a medic, just following his oath. But that was a lie. The truth was simpler and more complicated. He'd saved her because when he looked at her dying in the ice, he didn't see an enemy. He saw someone who needed help, someone who deserved to live. And now, sitting here with her hand over his heart and his hand over hers, he realized something else, something that terrified him. He was beginning to care for her. The ship's alarm shattered the moment. Tarek jerked away, running to the controls. The sensors showed multiple contacts, close and getting closer. His blood ran cold. "They found us," he whispered. Sarah was beside him instantly, despite her injuries. She looked at the screen, at the Vinthari ships converging on their position. Her jaw clenched. She turned to Tarek and spoke urgently, gesturing between them, then toward the airlock. Her meaning was clear. "Give me to them. Save yourself." "No," Tarek said firmly. He powered up the engines, his hands flying across the controls. "Not happening. Hold on to something." Kisara grabbed his arm, trying to stop him. She spoke more urgently, her golden eyes pleading. She pointed to herself, then made a cutting gesture across her throat. She was dead anyway. He should live. Tarek looked at her, at this fierce, proud woman who was willing to sacrifice herself to save him. And he knew in that moment that his feelings had gone far beyond simple compassion. "I told you," he said, touching her face gently. "I couldn't let you die then. I can't let you die now. So sit down and trust me." Something in his tone must have conveyed his meaning. Kisara stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her eyes never leaving his face. The wandering mercy lifted off, just as the first Vinthari patrol ship crested the ridge. Tarek pushed the engines hard, angling up through the storm. Ice crystals battered the hull, and the ship groaned in protest. "Come on, baby," Tarek muttered. "Just a little more." A beam of energy lanced past them, scorching the ice below. The Vinthari were firing. Tarek jinked left, then right, using the storm for cover. More ships appeared on Sensor 6 now, forming a net around them. Kasara spoke sharply, pointing at the screen. Tarek didn't need translation. She was telling him which ships were which were the most dangerous. She was helping him. They burst through the atmosphere into the black of space. Tarek immediately angled toward the nearby asteroid field, his only chance. Behind them, the Vinthari warships followed, their weapons charging. The first asteroid loomed ahead, massive and spinning. Tarek shot through a gap barely wider than his ship. Kasara gripped her seat, her face tight with fear, not for herself, Tarek realized, but for him. More asteroids. Tarek wove between them, using every trick he'd learned in 5 years of dangerous rescues. A Vinthari ship followed too closely and clipped an asteroid, spinning out of control. 5 left dot, then the communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in Vinthari, deep and commanding. Kasara's entire body went rigid, her face draining of color. The voice continued, now switching to accented but clear human speech. Human vessel, we know you carry valuable cargo. Surrender the female, and you will be rewarded beyond imagination. Wealth, protection, a place of honor in the new empire. Refuse, and you will die with her. You have 1 minute to decide. Tarek glanced at Kasara. She was staring at the communication panel with an expression of pure betrayal and rage. She spoke a single word, venom in every syllable. Vorin. The name meant nothing to Tarek, but clearly it meant everything to her. The voice continued. Mother, I know you hear me. The human cannot protect you. He's weak, fragile. Let him live. Command him to surrender you, and I will grant him his freedom. Mother. Tarek's mind reeled. The voice belonged to her son. Her own son was hunting her. Kasara turned to Tarek, and he saw tears streaming down her face again. She spoke urgently, gesturing to the communication panel, then to him, and to the stars beyond. She was telling him to take the deal, to save himself. Tarek looked at her, this powerful, regal woman, reduced to begging him to abandon her. This mother betrayed by her own child. This enemy who had become something so much more in just 3 days. He reached out and wiped a tear from her bronze cheek. Then he smiled, the expression sad but certain. 30 seconds, human, Vorin's voice warned. Choose wisely. Tarek turned to the communication panel and spoke clearly. I choose her. Now get the hell away from my ship. He cut the transmission and gunned the engines, diving deeper into the asteroid field. Behind him, Kasara made a sound half sob, half laugh. She reached out and grabbed his hand, squeezing it so tightly it hurt. The Vinthari ships opened fire in earnest now. Energy beams crisscrossed the asteroids around them. Tarek pushed the Wandering Mercy to its limits, the old ship rattling and groaning. An asteroid exploded to their left, peppered by fire. Debris bounced off their shields. They were going to die. Both of them. But Tarek found he didn't regret his choice. If these were his last moments, at least he was spending them doing what was right. Then Kasara pointed ahead, speaking rapidly. Tarek looked and saw it a massive asteroid with a deep crevasse splitting its surface. Barely wide enough for his ship, but the Vinthari warships were too large to follow. He didn't hesitate. The Wandering Mercy shot into the gap, scraping along the walls. Sparks flew. Alarm screamed. Kasara braced herself, still holding his hand. They burst out the other side into clear space. Tarek immediately activated a randomized jump sequence, and the ship lurched into faster-than-light travel. The asteroids, the warships, Vex 7 all vanished in a blur of light. They'd escaped. Tarek sat back, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. Kasara was shaking too, but when he looked at her, she was smiling. Actually smiling a brilliant, fierce expression that transformed her entire face. She pulled him toward her, wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. Tarek froze for a moment, then slowly returned the hug. She was warm and solid and alive, and so was he. Against all odds, they were both alive. When she finally pulled back, Kasara cupped his face in her large hands. She spoke softly in her language, the words flowing like music. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of respect. Gratitude, and something deeper. Tare. Kay closed his eyes. Breathing in her scent alien, but not unpleasant, like cinnamon and lightning storms. His heart pounded against his ribs, and he knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed. He'd saved an enemy, and found something he never expected. A connection. A purpose. Maybe even the beginning of something that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. The wandering Mercy sailed through the stars, carrying two souls who had crossed an impossible divide. Behind them was everything that said they should hate each other. Ahead was the unknown dot, but for the first time in 8 years, Tarek felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope.